Hi, this is James Governor, co-founder of RedMonk, and we're here for another RedMonk conversation. Today it's a RedMonk conversation about GraphQL. And I'm really pleased today that I've got Anant Jhingran, CEO and founder of a company called StepZen. And basically he's got some strongly held opinions. And I think we live in a world of opinionated infrastructure. Developers love strong opinions. So we're going to be hearing a bit that perhaps some of the myths and misconceptions the people got about the value of this. And I guess we should say hello, Anant. How are you today?
Doing absolutely fantastic, James. It's just an absolute pleasure to have a dialogue with you. You and I go back maybe more than a decade.
Don't tell them how far we go back.
No, just a decade. Decade is okay. We could be in our mid-30s and still have gone back a decade. So it's all great. So having done kind of some technology shifts over the course of my my slightly longish professional life, what I've seen is that there's almost never something that comes in and completely replaces some other stack. Okay. And that's kind of a constant. That's a constant, whether you are an individual developer where you have learned skills A and B, and now you're trying to build upon that skill to learn a new framework, or whether you're a small enterprise and you have kind of built out certain data infrastructure and trying to figure out how to build some analytics on it, or whether you're a large enterprise that's having difficulty in hiring people and really want to kind of build on the skills that you already have. The constant is that while new technology comes in, it must coexist with and build upon existing skills, existing investments, and existing technology stacks. Okay, and that's exactly what I see happening in GraphQL too.
But wait, I've read the blog post. It says everything needs to be GraphQL now. GraphQL is the only way. We've got a secular shift going on. We're gonna throw everything out. Everything is going to be GraphQL enabled. Are you saying that this is not the truth?
No, everything will be GraphQL enabled. But two things: that whole trend will take some time. Okay, number one, and I remember having a dialogue with some fairly senior execs at IBM on why the transition is sometimes the kind of the toughest period in which things actually happen. So yes, absolutely strongly believe that GraphQL is the way in which applications will actually interact with all the data that actually sits around in and around developers and in and around small and medium large enterprises. Okay, but there's a second fundamental issue out there, which is that because of this kind of transition, there is this existing investment that has to be leveraged. So it's not the case that GraphQL is not going to become the way in which applications interact with backend data. That's absolutely true. But the key question is what represents the backend data? And that is, in my mind, the biggest investment that has to be leveraged in this particular space. So just to kind of give you an example, right? Okay. So as you might know, we did something called Apigee, and Apigee was all about API management. And somewhere around 2012 or 13, James, we were explaining to enterprises and developers and others, but medium enterprises as to what is APIs all about. And by about 15 or 16, we started to get requests, can you give us API management tools? So some inflection happened. But over the course of last decade, investments have been made, whether they've been made by API first companies like Stripe or Twilio, okay, or whether they've been made by big and small enterprises, or they've been made by developers leveraging SaaS APIs. REST-based infrastructure has become the mainstay with which enterprise data is accessed.
Okay. So as you say, I mean, I think this is interesting to me because you've been, to your point, you begun with sort of an argument from history. You were the patterns that you learned at Apigee in terms of the wave of REST APIs and their need for management And also, if we think about API enablement of those backend systems, you think there's a similarity of pattern in terms of GraphQL enablement as well?
A slight delta from what you said. So in reality, what is GraphQL? GraphQL is about providing one uniform way, one uniform query language for application developers to access backend data. And it's absolutely new and modern the way kind of GraphQL approaches it. I have seen how SQL approaches it. I have seen how REST approaches it. And GraphQL actually gets it, in my mind, really, really right. But the key question really is not whether GraphQL is right or not right. GraphQL is right. But where is the data that is being delivered by GraphQL? Okay. Is the data being purpose-built in support of GraphQL, or does the data already exist and is being leveraged in GraphQL? Okay.
Right.
And in my view, in my strongly held view, it is the latter rather than the former. Okay.
Okay.
So that's one. The second thing is this, that today applications connect with some logic that kind of connects with REST APIs all over. And some databases, but REST APIs and databases all over. If now a GraphQL layer comes about, are the applications going to change in one day, okay, to actually start leveraging GraphQL to connect with the same backends? The answer is no. So there has to be a transition for not just how the data is accessed, but how the data is actually delivered also. So what we are finding is that developers are looking for not just GraphQL, but perhaps some REST wrappers around GraphQL so that they are still working with their kind of current worldview and yet having much better capabilities in order to be able to access the data. So in general, transitions happen not in kind of one fell swoop, but it slowly chips away at different parts of the layered stack. And that's exactly what I strongly believe, that GraphQL will actually help chip that away. But many of the existing stuff will kind of stay around and hang around as GraphQL takes larger and larger part of this application to data stack.
Okay. Let me ask you a question about developer experience there, because I think you're sort of talking about, sort of infrastructure. And we certainly live in a world where I think there's a more important consideration of that developer experience. It's not enough to just say, okay, here are the services. The tools need to be presented in such a way that the tool chain is easy, because you're competing against, because developers have to be productive, right? That's what we're doing here. So if we think about this developer experience, I think one of the things we can often see with technology is we have that mean time to dopamine. So it's like, oh, this feels fantastic. This is great. I'm gonna start using Docker, and this is making me so productive. It's so great. And then suddenly you've got an application with 4 Docker containers, and it's not so much fun. Or serverless functions. Oh, it's so great. I'm building a serverless function. This is great. I love this experience. And then suddenly you've got 10 serverless functions, and you're like, how do I manage this? This sucks. So like from what's the story with kind of GraphQL, which can immediately, you're like, oh, look at this tree. This makes sense. I get this. But then suddenly, as you're managing a more complex thing, to me, does it follow any of that pattern? Is there feels great to start with, but actually it's much harder than you initially realize?
Yes, that's exactly right. I remember, I'm a big Pink Floyd fan. Okay. And there's a song in the wall that, how can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Okay. And fundamentally,
my friend Thomas calls that broccoli and ice cream. You can't have your ice cream. It's a more vegetarian one. You can't have your ice cream until you eat your broccoli.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So and I'm a vegetarian, and yet that particular phrase has stuck in me. But the fundamental thing is really this, that the dopamine, the pudding, okay, is absolutely fantastic. Okay. But in the end, success comes not from the pudding part of it, but the energy and everything else comes from either the broccoli or the meat and everything else. So the question, so the real question is, can you actually kind of eat the cake and have it too? in that sense. And if I just kind of point to one example, I'll just give you one example. And I think that's where the world is going in GraphQL too. And that is the example of Google search. So look at Google search. Google search did in some incredibly hard things, okay? Page rank and crawling and knowledge graph and all the other things that we have kind of grown to love. I got a chance to spend 3 years at Google and I saw that from inside. But Google search did one more thing, which is they made search really, really simple. Okay, if you remember, James, before that, in Alta Vista days, you had to say James within 3 words of governor. Okay.
I thought we said we weren't going to talk in timeframes longer than 10 years. I'm sure Alta
Okay,
Vista.
15, 20.
What's
Okay.
this Alta Vista that you're talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Awesome. Shoot. Okay. Ignore that example, right? But Google came about and said, that's all nonsense. Okay. Mm-hmm. Just say James Governor Redmond. Yeah. Or just say James Governor and we'll figure out what it is. So Google was able to kind of crack the formula on doing incredibly hard things that actually make things successful and yet making it really, really simple for the rank and file users to actually access.
To be honest, Google search used to be a lot better than it is now.
Forget it. Those are all commercial.
No, I mean, to your point, because there was a time, and I'm not going to say how long, we'll go this thing again. Certainly that blogs were quite well ranked if you had a lot of inbound links. So, that was good.
Yes,
there was a time, and this wasn't when, you had your, it reflected the fact that it was personalized search because you had a Google account, where just a Google search, you could type in James Governor and I was there. But that was before they discovered the joys of commerce and becoming $1 trillion or what,
No, I agree. Okay, listen.
Totally. Anyway, we don't need to go on that, but yeah.
So in the world of GraphQL, exactly. The GraphQL, as you started off, GraphQL is incredibly easy to get started, but success in GraphQL is incredibly hard. Okay. And I think that over the course of next 3 or 4 years, what will happen is technology will come about that will be able to solve the hard problems and yet keep that thing incredibly easy. Okay?
Is this success in performance, in usability? What are the vectors here for success as you see it? Like what will we need to improve in order to make it easier?
No, so to make it successful, and then I'll tell you what we need to do to make it easier. So just to be very clear, right? So what is the purpose of having a GraphQL API that can fetch customer data, that can fetch order data, that can fetch delivery data? It's awesome, right? One query and you can get all of that. But if your wheel is spinning out there while you're waiting for that particular piece of data to come about, then what is the advantage of collecting all those bits together and yet the end user goes away because the data is not actually delivered, right? So there is nothing which says that, look, you can get easy stuff, but if you don't solve that kind of hard problems underneath it, okay, then that easy is fleeting, okay? And then actual end users that you're trying to target will actually move away. So performance, for example, is something that you have to absolutely solve. And the way I like to call it, James, is that GraphQL has to be performant above because the application has to be able to ping it and get the responses back. But it has to be stingy below because the backends are what the backends are. Okay, the backends, you're not going to be kind of continuously upgrading your backends, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you kind of do this impedance mismatch between being performant above and stingy below?
Okay.
And how do you actually do that without imposing all the performance burden onto the developer who's writing the GraphQL API? How do you do what databases did to the world of GraphQL, James? In the world of databases, when you ask a question, give me all employees in this thing, you're not going around and telling the database how to do it. The database basically figures out how to do it. You're just asking the database what you want. How will the world of GraphQL come about where the front-end devs, the app devs ask for what they want and the GraphQL system figures out how to optimize and execute it. This is one example of really, really hard problem that needs to be solved without imposing the burden back on the developers to actually optimize it. Okay. And we've got one trick that I think is going to make a huge difference in this world. And I want to tell you about it. But that's an example of a really hard problem that has to be solved, okay, for GraphQL to be successful.
Okay. And obviously, yeah, you're thinking about, I mean, if we think about your journey, I mean, yeah, so Apigee, you built API gateways before. Before that, you were actually doing relational databases. You know a little bit about query optimization, I understand. You may have spent some time with Stonebreaker and so on. So is there value in what you learned? You know, you're talking about if there are some similarities to what we did with the database, like is that part of the mission here?
That's exactly right. So we believe, and we have seen this happening from other technologies too. For example, some of the people who are in this space like Apollo and Hasura, but we actually strongly believe that GraphQL API must be constructed declaratively. Okay, so if you look at in the world of databases, James, obviously the query is declarative. You're just asking for give me average salary of employees of this department. Perfectly fine. But the way the database is actually set up is also declarative, right? You're saying create table employees. You're not telling the database, lay this stuff out on this disk or do this here or cluster this like this, etc., wherever possible, right? So what happens is that the two worlds that the database system is set up declaratively and the query that comes in is declarative allows the database system to actually combine and actually optimize, okay? In the world of GraphQL today, the GraphQL query is declarative. Give me customers and their orders and the delivery status, etc. It's all perfectly declarative. But the way the GraphQL is constructed is very procedural. Okay. And what that means is that you're basically firing up and writing your programs with respect to how to answer that query and everything else. And therefore, the net of it is that there's no other system in place that will take a declarative query and a procedural implementation and be able to kind of optimize it.
Okay.
So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we want to ensure that the GraphQL system is set up declaratively, okay? So that when a declarative query comes in, the magic can happen just like in the world of database.
Okay, so we've got...
And that's a firmly held belief that we
Okay, so we've got our strongly held beliefs. One, coexistence. It's not going to happen overnight. That one makes sense, although there are a lot of true believers that are like, okay, everything should be GraphQL now. Two, declarative. So we've got, concepts from API, the API, the world of APIs, one from database. So if we think about, I understand that, another one of your, I guess the third platform, or the third pillar for you in your strongly held beliefs, concern sort of href and thinking about how the World Wide Web worked. So tell us a bit about that, because I think this is quite an interesting way of thinking about GraphQL and the work that we need to do.
Awesome. No, exactly. So I'm not going to drag you into when I learned about this because you're
No, I'm just messing with you. I mean, look, I've got the white in my beard. You can drag me back as far as you want.
Okay.
Awesome. So you talk about hypercards if you want. We can go.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that in such a long time.
No, we can do that.
Awesome.
Take us. We can go further back than that if you want. No, it's fine.
Awesome. Hey, so there's a kind of internet, of course, came about, but the World Wide Web came about because of number one, simple HTML and HTTP protocols. Absolutely right. But one of the critical constructs in kind of the HTML was this thing called href. And what href did was it allowed random pages, okay, whether the pages were in the same domain or whether pages were across the continent, to actually connect to each other, so that you could kind of come into the MLB homepage and be connected to San Francisco Giants on one side, and New York Yankees on the other. I was about to say Brooklyn Dodgers, but no.
Well, look,
And
I
New
mean,
York
the thing is, I mean, Stephen O'Grady is going to be very angry with you that you mentioned the New
oh,
York team.
yeah.
I'm very happy with that.
And not Boston.
But I
Okay,
think if you're
Boston.
talking to
Boston.
Red
What is
Monk,
it? Was it?
you know, just for
Yeah,
me, I'm fine. But like, if you
yeah.
ever want Stephen O'Grady to, you know, talk to you
Yes.
again, you definitely should
Yes.
be talking about
And
the Red Sox.
it will connect to Boston Red Sox. Yay, Stephen. Okay, awesome. So how did that happen? That happened because the pages became a web. Okay, by this declarative construct called href. Href didn't care about what technology this page was implemented in, what technology this page was implemented in. It just said that when you kind of came in, you were able to kind of traverse and connect to something else. Now, if you look at the world of APIs, the world of APIs are kind of evolving in kind of its own random space. A Stripe has a set of APIs, a Twilio has a set of APIs. All these kind of new API companies are kind of coming up within a developer's own world. Their backend system will have a set of, so they're all kind of evolving independently. The beauty about GraphQL is that you get kind of a web of APIs to kind of come together so that when a developer comes in, she can ask for the customer data and yet get data from the orders and yet kind of go all the way to FedEx and pick the data from on delivery. So what is this fabric that will be the web of APIs, just like there's a fabric for the web of pages? And we actually believe that the only way this will happen is when those things are kind of declarative constructs, which says, when you're here to get there, this is what you need to do. Okay. This is the kind of bits that need to be transferred there. And this is what, right? So fundamentally, the equivalent of href is what will drive GraphQL, the graphs of APIs to be formed. And we want to be a small part of making that happen by introducing these declarative constructs that are equivalent of those hrefs. And then the same declarative constructs will exist within a domain, across domain. As I say, it will be turtles all the way down.
Do we need new standards for that?
I think the standards will absolutely evolve, but standards almost always evolve after something becomes when it becomes
you have a new way of working and then
common and popular and there's no sense in imagining standards till this kind of web of APIs starts to kind of come up. And obviously some of us who are in the business, whether it's the Hasuras or StepZens or Apollos, need to kind of come together. But more importantly, equally importantly, all the developers who are actually building stuff using it need to kind of come together. And this will all kind of evolve. But my belief is that the whole web of APIs must be formed declaratively, because when it is declarative, you can have independent implementations and they can all kind of execute them efficiently, but everybody kind of ends up speaking the same language. And that's what I want to be part of that journey that will lead to the formation of this web of APIs.
Okay. So that's your strongly held beliefs. Those are your strongly held opinions. Hopefully some people will disagree with them, because outrage is always good for engagement. So other people will agree with them.
What I said was so obvious.
Do you think it's also obvious that, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that, you know? I think, well, I had a conversation just the other day where the person I was talking to was, you know, very much of the opinion. I mean, and you've mentioned your peers in this market, your competitors, that there was too much complexity actually, and that the focus needed to be much more, to your last point, on it's all about the domain API. So you know, so for example, it's got to be about deep understanding of the Stripe API and how that should be used, or Shopify. You know, let's really understand the API so we can make that specific developer experience even easier. as opposed to a more general view. So I think there's plenty of room for anger and people saying, oh, why have they taken that approach?
Yeah.
So
of course.
outrage, confirmation
And
bias,
yes,
those are fundamental forces in the universe.
yeah. And I just strongly believe that one of the most long-lasting technologies out there has been databases. Okay, and databases taught the world that kind of having developers interact with some subsystem declaratively, and having the subsystem then make some choices on behalf of the developer, okay, actually leads to in many cases better end result than exposing everything and every knob and making the developers kind of program their way to all the kind of complex backend issues. And I feel if you really look at it, right, this it's very difficult to say that something would last 40 years, 50 years. And in some ways, this is the era of resurgence of Postgres and relational databases and everything else. And it's because kind of the core decisions that were made early on, which is take the optimization complexity away from the developers, okay, and let the system handle that, is exactly what makes stuff last for a very, very long time. And that's a strongly held belief that that's what will happen in the world of GraphQL and in the world of API.
Okay, well, there you have it. I think that makes sense. That's pretty much a wrap. That's a good conversation all held together. Anant Jhingran, thank you very much for joining me today. It's another Redmonk conversation. And that's the strongly held beliefs that Anant has 3 pillars, and really tackling something where he sees as maybe misconceptions about GraphQL. So thanks for joining us, Anant, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, James.
Thanks.